Hollow Creek, a town untouched by time, quaint, quiet, a place where secrets whispered through generations. One story haunted the town more than others, the Grinning Man, a spectre, they said, haunting the edges of reality. And now, after decades of silence, the whispers started again. Mr. Wilkins, the antique shop owner, dusted off a forgotten treasure, hidden deep within his shop, a relic of a bygone era, the photograph. He found it tucked away in a drawer, hidden from sight. It depicted a carnival, joyous and bright. But at the edge, a shadow loomed. A man with a grin too wide, unnatural, disturbing.
What is this?
Mr. Wilkins felt a chill. He recognized the legend. The photograph emanated a strange energy. The Grinning Man had returned to Hollow Creek. Emma, a young journalist, craved a story to make her name. She arrived in Hollow Creek, drawn by its quaint charm and whispered secrets. She heard the rumors, the Grinning Man, the photograph, a perfect story.
This could be my big break.
She visited Mr. Wilkins's shop. Her eyes fell on the photograph. The man's grin sent shivers down her spine. She saw an opportunity, a chance for fame, a chance to prove herself.
Be careful, some stories are best left untold.
Mr. Wilkins hesitated. He knew the dangers. But Emma was persuasive, driven. He relented, handing her the photograph. She would soon realize her mistake. Emma's apartment, small, cluttered, filled with the clutter of a life half-lived. The photograph sat on her desk, a haunting centerpiece. She tried to focus on her work, tried to ignore the chill creeping into the room. The air grew heavy, oppressive.
It's just my imagination, right?
She felt a presence watching her. She dismissed it as nerves, the power of suggestion. But the feeling persisted. Lights flickered. A low hum resonated from the photograph. A seed of doubt had been planted. Sleep offered no escape, only nightmares, vivid, terrifying.
I dreamt of the carnival, dark, desolate, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and decay.
Distorted carnival music, a haunting melody. She wandered through the maze of broken rides and abandoned tents, always the feeling of being watched, hunted.
And then I saw him, the Grinning Man, standing at the edge of my vision. She woke up gasping.
Days blurred, reality shifted. The line between what was real and what was not became increasingly hazy. Objects in her apartment moved, subtle rearrangements.
My reflection in the mirror, no longer alone. A figure stood behind me, fleeting glimpses, gone when I turned around.
The humming from the photograph intensified. It burrowed into her mind. The Grinning Man was reaching out. She was becoming a participant in a nightmare. Days turned into weeks, weeks into a waking nightmare. The photograph, once a source of journalistic ambition, morphed into a symbol of dread. It pulsed with an energy that was both repellent and strangely alluring. Emma couldn't tear her gaze away.
The changes were subtle at first, a matter of millimeters. The Grinning Man, relegated to the corner of the image, now loomed closer. His grin, a grotesque mockery of joy, seemed to stretch wider.
Then came the new figure, a shadowy silhouette lurking in the background. Each time, the figure grew more defined, more menacing. Professor Caldwell, Hollow Creek's resident historian, was a man of books and hushed whispers. His study, crammed with dusty tomes and yellowed maps, smelled of old paper and forgotten secrets. Emma found him hunched over a pile of ancient texts, his brow furrowed in concentration.
Professor Caldwell, I need your help. I found this photograph, and strange things have been happening ever since.
He listened intently as she recounted her experiences. His gaze, sharp and knowing, never left her face. When she finished, he sighed.
The photograph, it's a conduit, a bridge between our world and something else, something dark.
He spoke of the photograph's history, of its previous owners, each one meeting an untimely end.
It feeds on fear, on obsession. You need to get rid of it.
Emma left his study with a heart full of unease. Mrs. Harper lived in a dilapidated Victorian house on the outskirts of town. A shroud of tragedy hung over the place. She found Mrs. Harper huddled by the fireplace.
I owned the photograph once, a lifetime ago. My sanity, my family, my will to live.
She confirmed the professor's stories.
And the photograph, it's his prison and his weapon.
Emma left the house shaken, haunted by Mrs. Harper's words. The nightmares intensified. No longer content with the shadows of her mind, the grinning man began to bleed into her waking hours. A flicker in the corner of her eye, a distorted reflection in a window pane. One night it went beyond fleeting glimpses. She woke to a bone-chilling cold. The air in her room crackled with an unnatural energy. Her gaze darted to the photograph on her desk. It glowed with an eerie light.
No, this can't be happening.
And there he was, no longer confined to the image. The grinning man stood at the foot of her bed, his grin stretched impossibly wide, splitting his face into a grotesque parody of a smile. She was no longer just an observer. She was the grinning man's target. Sleep, once a refuge, was now a battlefield. The grinning man haunted her every dream. He lurked in the shadows, always watching, always grinning.
I would wake, heart pounding, the echo of his laughter ringing in my ears. The line between dream and reality blurred. Was he real, or was I losing my grip on sanity?
Her apartment, once a sanctuary, became oppressive. She felt his presence everywhere. The humming from the photograph grew louder. It vibrated in her bones, a constant throbbing reminder of the darkness that had seeped into her life.
The whispers returned. No longer faint murmurs. They were clear now, distinct, taunting me, mocking my fear.
They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Her name, repeated over and over again, a chilling serenade from the abyss. The carnival from her dreams. It haunted her waking hours now. Vivid flashes of broken-down rides, the smell of popcorn and decay, the distorted carnival music.
I felt an almost magnetic pull towards it, a compulsion I couldn't explain. It was as if the photograph was calling me, drawing me in.
She tried to resist, to focus on her work, but the carnival beckoned. Marked by the grin,
She woke one morning to a terrifying sight, a reflection in the mirror that chilled her to the core. Her own face stared back at her, but something was different.
her lips were curved into a slight smile, a grotesque parody of joy. The same unnerving grin that haunted her nightmares.
Panic surged through her. She was changing.
Midnight, the witching hour, the air hung heavy, thick with anticipation.
Emma's apartment, once a haven of normalcy, now crackled with an unseen energy. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls.
Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the night. Professor Caldwell's words echoed in her mind, a potent mix of warning and instruction.
He had given her the ritual, a desperate gamble, a way to fight back.
A wave of dizziness washed over her as she chanted the words, ancient and powerful. The air grew colder, biting at her skin. The photograph pulsed with an eerie light. Taking a deep breath, she steeled her nerves and stepped towards the photograph. The world dissolved around her, the familiar confines of her apartment melting away like smoke. A wave of nausea hit her, the sensation of falling, tumbling through a void of darkness.
Then, just as abruptly, she landed on solid ground. She gasped, her lungs burning, her senses reeling. She stood in the heart of the carnival from her nightmares. But this was no dream. This was real. Horribly real.
The air hung heavy, thick with the cloying scent of cotton candy and decay. She was in the belly of the beast now. He emerged from the shadows slowly, as if savouring her fear. Towering over her, his presence seemed to consume the very air around them. The Grinning Man.
Sinister chuckle.
His grin was a grotesque mockery of joy, stretching impossibly wide, splitting his face in two. His eyes, once empty sockets in the photograph, now burned with a cold, malevolent light. They bored into her, stripping away her defenses, exposing her deepest fears.
Gasp.
For a moment she froze, paralyzed by terror.
Don't look at his eyes.
She forced her gaze away from his soul-piercing stare, focusing instead on his grin. Her apartment, bathed in the soft light of dawn, felt strangely peaceful. The nightmare was over. The candles, burned down to nubs, cast flickering shadows that danced on the walls. Her gaze darted to the spot where the photograph had stood. Gone. She was safe. Emma. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, the emotional and physical toll of the night hitting her with full force. The carnival, the Grinning Man, it all felt like a distant, fevered dream. She stumbled to her feet, her legs shaky, and made her way to the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face etched with exhaustion, but she was still herself. The faint grin that had marked her earlier was gone. She was free, or so she thought. As she reached for a towel, a movement in the mirror caught her eye. Her heart stuttered in her chest. For a fleeting moment, she saw it. A distortion in her reflection. The grin. It was back. Her breath caught in her throat. Was the Grinning Man's curse more insidious than I realized? Days turned into weeks. Weeks bled into months. Life in Hollow Creek settled back into its familiar rhythm. The whispers about the Grinning Man faded, replaced by mundane gossip and the changing seasons. Emma threw herself into her work, the local newspaper now filled with stories of bake sales and town council meetings. Emma, I've moved on. The nightmares have stopped. The carnival no longer haunts my dreams. The faint grin in the mirror was just a trick of the light, a remnant of a time I'd rather forget. I'm in control now. I faced my fears and emerged victorious. Yet a shadow lingered at the edge of her awareness, a subtle unease. She found herself avoiding mirrors, shying away from her own reflection. Sometimes at night, when the wind howled outside her window, she could almost hear the echoes of distorted carnival music, faint and far away, like a memory refusing to be silenced. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun cast long shadows across Hollow Creek, Emma found herself drawn back to Mr. Wilkins's antique shop. The familiar scent of dust and old paper washed over her as she stepped inside. Mr. Wilkins, his hair now completely white, looked up from behind the counter, a flicker of recognition in his tired eyes. "Mr. Wilkins, you know, I thought I'd seen the last of that photograph, but it seems some things have a way of coming back." He held up a vintage photograph, his face a mask of concern. Emma's blood ran cold. It was another carnival scene, the edges faded with age, and there at the edge of the frame stood a lone figure. A man with a grin too wide, a grin that sent shivers down her spine. The cycle had begun again.